To kind of zoom in a little bit on the subject of the last video, the baseline of attachment, I really wanted to expand upon the psychology of these individuals who are prone to this attachment, and also what comes with that attachment, being manipulated in a way to be more prone to attachments. And in order to manipulate the masses of people to attach to something, you have to first understand the various types of people out there. And you can come at it from every angle, but for this video, I wanted to focus on the very tangible types that are out there, the two types, the givers and the takers, and how that mindset has been manipulated and coddled and fed to benefit a certain group of people at the expense of another group of people. So, like I said in the last video, the most heavily vested group of people, so-called race of people, because white is not a race, it's a construct. It's a mental construct designed to have an effect on the psyche of the masses of people. The same with black. White is supposed to make you feel, act, and respond a certain way. The same way black is supposed to make you feel, act, and respond a certain way. Through all races. So in reference to the foundations, the reasons why a so-called white Jesus with blonde hair, blue eyes was that image, the image that was sold. Just as the image of a globe earth was sold to the masses of people, it's the same kind of mind control. For what purpose? We put so much attention on the images in reference to flat earth and that whole fight between flat versus globe and so on and so forth. What about the image of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus? How has that affected people? Why aren't truthers going into that? A lot of the times that individuals don't go into these streams of information is because it's too personal. It's too personal to start talking about relationships. Once you get too personal, you risk losing subscribers, losing followers. This is why a lot of these channels do not talk about this personal information. They stay very abstract and talk about subjects. And even if you bring up this information, they will demonize you. They will dismiss, deflect, project onto you because they don't want to deal with that and risk losing their following. Even though they know how deep these mind controls go, how deep these attachments to these systems go. In that last video, I was explaining to people that it's very obvious. The new world, the so-called free world, the United States, the last nation that was colonized on a mass scale, completely killing people, taking the land, destroying the land, and like a sickness infiltrating the rest of the world, other nations, destabilizing entire nations, assassinating leaders in order to maintain the balance of the imbalanced system. So when you say that there's an attachment, a group of people who are holding the system up, where's the power? Who's generating the energy that these systems are working on? It has to come from a group of people. Like I said, people who are still selling you the Democrats and Republicans, the political scene, as if it is not the core of the biggest problems of the world. They are the ones who are maintaining, they're feeding the energy to this system. The ones playing the fence, so-called playing the fence in that world the same way. These TYT channels who are supposedly sharing truth information, progressive information. Progressive ain't nothing but a polished version of a Democrat and a Republican. It's the same thing. And when it's more polished, it's actually more dangerous because you're going to gather a larger group of people who are going to follow you. So when you look at Democrats and Republicans and progressives and the whole sustainable energy crew of people, what picture do you see? What group of people do you see? Who are the people who are filling these stadiums of politicians? What are the majority of the people? And I'm using the United States as an example of the idea of progressivism around the world, because this is the system that is being sold to set the foundation to this so-called New World Order. other nations want to be like the United States. What does that mean? They want to have the technology. They want the system that is running here. And this system added to that want and that need by destabilizing their systems. You destroy them, turn them into third world countries so they can worship your so-called first world, and then use the example of the first world to sell to the rest of the world. And when you sell it to them with a high interest rate and with all kinds of attachments in their contract. Just like economic hitmen are sent by the CIA, sent by the government into other nations to talk to these presidents to say, well, if you can't pay back these loans that we've loaned to you, then give us your land, give us your resources. Put this leader in this position, pay into our corporations. And then they end up owning the entire nation. This is how these leaders of other nations are put into positions of leadership. This is how entire nations are taken over. And it's all hidden under the guise of, this is for your benefit. They can do no wrong. Why? Because their leader, their spiritual leader or spiritual foundation is the savior of the world. They're doing this because they're acting in the word of so-called God. They're following the good word. And who are the ones who are going to be, like I said in reference to, who are the ones who are going to energize the system? Who are the group of people who are going to be the batteries for that system? Well, it's the ones who most emulate the Savior. This is where that energy of the Savior complex comes from. So just as there are side effects that we, as not blonde hair, not blue-eyed individuals, there are reactions. There are side effects to how we are going to psychologically respond to being inundated with the blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus program. There are ways that we're going to respond to it. It's going to destroy us in many different ways around the world. We're going to create a whole bunch of self-hatred. We're going to hate each other, hate our mothers, hate our fathers, hate our kids, not be able to interact, be spiritually confused and dead in so many different ways because we don't know where to go. We're looking at an artificial version of the spiritual reality because we're looking through the lenses of a blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus program. Not only that, it puts us second to the people who are the living embodiment of that blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus individual. We're not even able to attain that saviorhood because there are people who are born into that position. They'll live in that world of destroying you, not giving a shit about you, because once they start to give a shit about you, they'll have to let go of what they have. They'll have to hold themselves responsible. And as we know, narcissists can never own up to anything. They'll never be able to be responsible for anything. This is why it's psychologically dangerous to even assume that they can empathize with you, to even assume that they have your best interest in mind. They do not. This is not generalizing across the board so-called white people. I'm just saying in reference to the narcissistic mentality, which the idea of whiteness is an embodiment of. That so-called truth is not wanting to be addressed by people. So these side effects, like I said, we have the side effects of self-destructive side effects to the blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus program. The other side of that are the so-called progressive side effects with the people who are seeing themselves as living embodiments of Jesus. How does that look in society? Well, back in the day, not that long ago, colonizers embodied this by going to lands where, for example, in the United States, we had the copper-colored American Indians here. When they got here, they arrived here with that mentality of being better than you, being your savior. They had to do something. And when you sprinkle in a little bit of, I don't give a shit about you because I'm better than you, that's when it gets out of hand and going into the space of taking and destroying your land, destroying your people, so on and so forth. When they arrived here, they had that mentality of the taker because they have empowered themselves and been empowered by society, by the system over generations to say, well, if we are the takers, we are takers for the benefit of those givers. We are doing it for them. This is how they have psychologically rationalized colonialism. And that's how they sold it to the Europeans, who later started to flood this land. Come over to the free world, jump on a boat, be free over here. They were building their army with so-called civilians, so-called white civilians. They were Europeans, they were Germans, they were French, they were Irish when they were in Europe. But as soon as they hit over here, what did they become? White. And that whiteness was an army against what? The savage blackness of the natives. And they realized that we had a different mindset. We had a different relationship with nature, with each other. We were naturally givers. Our relationship with this experience overall is to give. This is how we are around the world. So when they arrived here, we naturally gave. And we gave and we gave and we gave until we realized that, oh shit, these takers are liars. They don't care about us. For people who want to go into the deeper layer of the psyche, look into the relationship between the savior and the narcissist. Because the narcissist is the one who looks for the givers. The savior is the perfect food for a narcissist to feed upon. Because the giver will continue to give and give and give and give into a narcissist forever. Because the narcissist will never be full. And when that's the case, the narcissist knows that it has a forever food supply in the giver. That's why you see these in relationships. Somebody who's really submissive and somebody who's really taking advantage of that. So that's one relationship in reference to the narcissist using the taker, using the giver. But there's another extreme side effect that comes in reference to the giver. And just like I'm saying, it's not all so-called white people that are takers. It's not what's being said. The fact is, all people have a tendency to lean towards one or the other, a giver or a taker. If society amplifies one over the other, more people will lean more towards that, especially if it's focused on one particular group. So-called white people have been celebrated for centuries for being the takers. They love it because it was sold. Taking was sold as taking for the benefit of so-called humanity, for the evolution of our people. They sold in the history books that colonialism, genocide, stealing the land, destroying the resources is a benefit. This technology is a benefit. It's a peak of evolution. This is how it was sold to the masses of people. The spiritual foundation to that mentality was to sprinkle in the blonde hair, blue eyed Jesus program, because that was going to destabilize the not so-called white people and amplify the so-called white people. That was going to take over how they were spiritually engaging in society and with each other, while politically, the colonial program, through the institutions, how they sold it to you, covered everything else. So they took everything and tried to hide it by giving the masses this Christian is the mainstream religion. It's the only one. It's the right way to be. It's the progressive religion. It's not like these religions. The narcissist, in order to continue to get its food from the givers, it has to give you something back. It has to appear to be like you. It has to appear to be a giver. You can't just go around saying I'm a taker. No, you have to give something back in order to maintain your giver's confidence. So they gave you religion. They gave you the institutions of so-called intelligence. They gave you the idea of the new world, the free world. They gave you the idea of Western civilization at the expense of Eastern savages. All of this was given to give off the appearance of being givers to hide the fact that they were takers. These systems are still alive and well today. The indigenous people around the world who had their lands stolen, who had their people genocided, they were of the mentality of the giver mentality. They gave themselves to nature, to the Most High, to the experience, because they were aware that they are beyond this experience. So they were giving themselves to the infinite. It was natural for them. It was in their way of life to give themselves to the infinite, to not glorify the finite. Another kind of person is glorifying the finite. This system right now is glorifying the finite when it says that the institutions are the peak of humanity. Going to the moon, supposedly, they're selling you the finite. All of this, everything that's worshipped in the mainstream society is a selling you of the finite at the expense of the infinite. And like the other systems I was explaining before, what do they have to do? They have to sell you a false, a synthetic version of the infinite. So they tell you, you're in infinite universes. There's this multiverse, and there's the Big Bang, and then beyond that, and then they're selling you a synthetic infinite and giving you religion and giving you the new world for your benefit. So you had people who bought into the taker program, and they were perfectly vested into the finite. And then the people who didn't want to be a part of that, but were still a part of that so-called progressive mentality, they were going to be a part of it in a different way. Say they wanted to be givers within the taking society. This is what it is. Those givers, you can't have one without the other. You can't exist as a giver within a taking system. But this is what this whole sustainable living progressive mentality is. Taken to the extreme, a synthetic giver develops into the savior program. This is why the synthetic savior, the progressive mentality, is sold even to this day, even more so. It's being sold hard right now. Progressivism is being sold hard right now because the more saviors you make, the more givers that you put out there, the more food there is for the takers. The narcissists need food, so they're amplifying this giving mentality when they know they can just take from you at any time, feed off of you at any time. This is why people like Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, all your new age community people are out there right now because they exist on a level. They exist in the higher tier of the taker's realm. So they're not going to experience the same hardships that you, as a viewer of that information, is going to experience when they push out the next levels of their system. So their jobs are to maintain the idea of progressive give-ism, savior-isms. This is what people like Russell Brand are well aware of. He knows. He's good. He's taken care of. He's in that group. Whether he's definitely in the group meetings with these individuals or not, he's taken care of because he's in that system. He's in that higher tier. Might not be the highest of tiers, but he's communicating on a level that affects masses of people. This is not to only focus on him. He's just being used as an example. People like Oprah, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, they fit into these categories too. Like I said, you don't have to be conscious of it. You're just used as a tool. Right now, you have these little micro or mini saviors out there. This is what's happening on YouTube. YouTube is developing an algorithm. The very nature of YouTube is developing the savior complex. It monetized the savior complex. And even if people are just saying, oh, well, I'm just sharing this information for whatever, I'm not really a part of the savior complex. If they're in a constant state of doing something in order to receive monetary gain, meaning they have to do it all the time, it doesn't matter if they are consciously aware of their savior complex engagement. That just means if they're doing it for money, doesn't matter what their motives are. If they're doing it for money to get something back, they constantly engage to get something back, then they just become synthetic saviors, where there is no difference between a synthetic savior and a so-called organic savior. It's still a complex. So in this complex, in this savior complex, like I said, with the attachments to the system, you're dealing with a certain group of people. What group of people who's always behind these systems that I'm getting ready to list off? Like the diversity programs, the climate change programs, the veganisms, the cleanup nature programs. What faces do you see when you think about sustainable environments? First of all, why do you even need to worry about the environment? What happened to the environment? Why are we not dealing with the causes of these problems? See, this is part of that deflection and projection program. The narcissist can't look at those systems because that would mean taking responsibility. These progressive, sustainable environment, diverse climate change programs are just another version. It's a so-called positive way to deflect from taking responsibility of the causes of these problems. So this is the giver's version of deflecting from the causes of these problems. The synthetic givers that are living inside the taking, they want the taker mentality, the taker system to stay alive. The takers in the taker system just take. They don't give a shit. These are the mentality, the Trump mentality, the make America great again people. The mentality of I don't give a fuck about history. I don't give a shit about nothing that happened. You need to just get over it. We're about progressing. We're about evolving. We did this already. This is our land. This is our America. We're just gonna, those people, they're just gonna take. They don't give a shit about anything else. They are so far removed from taking responsibility from anything that you become a threat. They will kill you. They don't give a fuck about you. And like I said, the so-called positive, the givers, the synthetic givers within that taker mentality who don't want to deal with the taker mentality, the taker system, a lot of them in the truther community, their job is to deflect, dismiss your storyline, dismiss your perspectives. Because if your perspectives make them vulnerable, that means that they are one step closer to taking responsibility from what's going on. And they can't do that. They can't allow you to do that. They have to be 2, 3, 4 steps away from taking responsibility. And if you are sitting in a space of putting the responsibility out on a platter, then you're public enemy number one. And one of the most effective things to do, especially on the internet, is to deflect, because it's a weapon that looks like progressive. It looks progressive, but it's really an attack. It's working for the taker system. The system knows that the thing that's most effective is positive information in reference to negative information. So if the system knows that, then they're going to have people who are going to amplify that so-called positive information, which is really working for the negative perspective. So the people who are supporting the diversity programs, like when you see all these interracial relationships online, this is not a realistic example of society. When you see the mainstream media, movies, television, social media, and you see 85% of black men or black women in interracial relationships, specifically with white women, black men with white women, or black women with white men, especially in these movies, when you see that, you're thinking, oh, progressive, we're coming together, we're unifying. But naturally, the facts are the complete opposite of that. 90% of the people around the world come together in relationships with people who are of their same cultural background. So what is the intent behind selling you that diversity? What is the intention behind selling you that mind control program? They're trying to amplify something. How does it have an effect on people? How is it affecting people? So-called white people feel they are the most progressive humans of the world when they see that stuff. Why? Because the people who do not engage in interracial relationships, they are now seen as old, the savage, the old ones, the not progressive people. They are outdated. They're not sustainable humans. You see all these these progressive rationalizations for certain systems that have a definite intention behind them. So, like I said, the facts are, when so-called white people, specifically, to focus on this for a moment, when they see this on television, when they hear it on the radio, when they see it in social media, when they watch it in their movies, when they see that stuff, they see themselves as the most progressive, the better humans than everybody else. And when they're better than you, you're worse than them. Those are two different things, because they have to hold themselves a certain way to be better than you and convince themselves of that, of being better, but also see you through the eyes of you being worse. It's a feeling, it's an internal feeling, and it's a projection onto you. Those are two different things. So the progressive system, when they sell these relationships the way they do, it starts to feed itself. The savior mentality, the savior complex starts to feed itself, because it's starting to generate more synthetic saviors in this taking system, in this narcissistic system. And then the people who just don't engage in that become, whether they are aware of it, they become narcissists. By feeding into the narcissistic system, they might be not even be seen as narcissists. They might not be diagnosed as narcissists, but since they are feeding into the narcissistic system, they are by proxy become the narcissist. And it's up to them to be the saviors of the ones who are less than, the ones who are less evolved. And what do they look like? You've seen all the examples. I've listed all the examples in just in this one video. So even these so-called pandemics are feeding into this. You can see it right now. Who are the saviors of today dealing with the pandemic? The people who are taking the vaccine, the people who are wearing the mask and pushing these mask mandates. They're the saviors of your kids, of your old people, of society. Hurry up and get vaccinated. Hurry up and wear your mask so we can get back to normal. We need to build back better. What does that mean? Follow the rules of this system. Who are the people who are going to follow the rules of this system? The people who are most fully vested and get privilege from this system. So you have your vaccinated saviors. You have your masked saviors, literally masked superheroes. All these sustainable living people you thought were progressive and truthers and all that other stuff, how many of them are now pushing this vaccine shit? This is all one big storyline. The sustainable living mentality, that atmosphere of an individual, it's used. They're using it. The ones who are projecting themselves as givers in a taking system. The sustainable living mentality is not trying to address, it's not trying to produce justice in reference to this system. It's trying to heal this system that was never designed to be working for the people in the first place. It's using this sustainability mentality, this progressive mentality, to synthetically go against colonialism. They're saying, oh, well, we're trying to fix what the system has broken by building back better with sustainable living and green energy and fighting climate change, not even realizing that they are setting the foundation. They're setting the table for the so-called New World Order. They're bringing it in under the guise of positive intentions. This is how the system utilizes that savior complex to work for the system. This is why the depths of the justice that needs to be never goes into. And if you say anything about it, you're a threat. So like I said, in reference to the interracial relationships, they see themselves as the progressive race of humanity. That's why, like I asked, what's the intention? What's the reason why they would show you 88 times out of 10 is going to be an interracial? It's probably like 9 times out of 10 on TV today. 9 times out of 10, if you see a white woman on TV, she's going to be involved in some kind of interracial relationship, specifically with a so-called black man, if it wants to be like super progressive. Why? Because what that does, like the Blonde Hair, Blue Eyed Jesus program, is it sets up this atmosphere in the mentality of people that it's progressive to do that. And what does that mean in reaction to that and the opposite of that? It's regressive to not engage in an interracial relationship. So marrying within your own so-called race is not progressive. This is what subconsciously and consciously is being sold to people with the mainstream media. And the proof that that's a problem, proof that there's intention behind that system, is the fact that it's the very opposite in reality. It's the opposite numbers. Like I said, 9 times out of 10, you see it on TV. Well, in reality, 9 times out of 10, a so-called black man is going to be with a so-called black woman. That's your proof. That's your motive. So like I said, the other side effect is they see themselves as progressives. They're the ones with the most love. Everybody else has less love since they're not progressive. It's not about love. It's about your little race. Oh, race is not bigger than love. You must be less evolved. Because the evolved human is not about death and destruction and war. The evolved human is from the New Age community, and they're all about love and connecting with our intergalactic extraterrestrial brethren. Love is the answer. Love will save the day. Aliens are smarter, and they're about love and positivity. Don't you listen to channelers? It's all about love. It's all about progressivism. When you go into these New Age communities, you mostly see so-called white people. It's feeding into it's just them seeing themselves, just like somebody would look on the wall and see a blind or blue-eyed Jesus. Oh, that's me. That's how I look. I must be the savior. Communities of saviors. So when you supposedly go against their progressive styles of interacting with society by naturally just dating somebody who is, or marrying somebody who is the same so-called race as you, they think you're a hater. They see you as projecting hate towards them, as if something is wrong with us. And this is the same thing that a narcissist would do. It would project onto their prey. All these narcissistic systems are alive and well and very obvious in society in order to maintain these race relations. Just like the Stop Asian Hate shit that was going on. It's still going on right now. I just saw in the news just like last night or something, them talking about and showing video again of Asian people being beat up. Why is that a thing? See, they'll talk about Asian hate, but they won't talk about the very fact that a huge majority of so-called Asians are taught, they're raised to hate so-called black people. It's in their culture. And it's not just Asians, but it's heavy within the so-called Asian community. And Asian people will tell you this. They are raised by their parents to hate so-called black people. But you don't see them talking about that. No, you see the incidents that happen in the community. So there's an intention behind it. If they only focus on the side effects, why are they not focusing on the cause? Because it's not about the cause. It's not even about the side effects. It's about distracting. When did Stop Asian Hate come out? Right when Black Lives Matter was out there. This is why. And what does Stop Asian Hate do? It deflects from the so-called black lives who are being attacked by this system. Who are the ones who are attacking the so-called black lives? So-called white people. In general, the so-called white system is the one that's attacking. That's why you need to have Black Lives That Matter. So in order to distract, to take away from the attention of so-called white people being the aggressors, you had to make the so-called black people the aggressors again. And what did they do? Amplified the idea of Asian hate. Put Asian hate out there to distract from the so-called Black Lives Matter campaign and stories that are going along with that, because they don't want to be revealed for being aggressors, criminals in society. So that's one way. The other thing is to demonize so-called black people. It's to double down on it now. And this is happening. Like I said, this is why it's so important to realize how so-called race is involved in society. And people just dismiss it all the time. No, that was done. You can see the amplifying of Stop Asian Hate. Who's controlling both of these storylines? Who benefits from both of these storylines running at the same time? Look at the so-called race of the people who are in Congress, who are in your police uniforms, who are running your cities, who are teaching your children. You can see who benefits because it's the atmosphere. It's the avatar. That's what it is. It's the so-called white avatar that needs to be defended. Like when I talk about this, I'm not talking about specifically like white people. It's the avatar of white people that is a benefit to this system. And so-called white people, they wear that avatar. They wear that suit when it's beneficial for them. So activating Stop Asian Hate to dismiss and demonize the Black Lives in the Black Lives Matter campaign was used to distract from the so-called white avatar that was being exposed with the so-called Black Lives Matter campaign. This is how so-called white people, the avatar of white people, is used in society to push certain agendas, to push more control towards this so-called new world order. There's no dismissing, there's no deflecting from that. These are facts being seen and lived every day. Because the narrative needs to be controlled. Who is it being controlled by? This avatar. Activating Stop Asian Hate was designed to control the dialogue, control the narrative, to amplify one conversation at the expense of another conversation. And this same thing happens, it's like I just explained, with the amplifying of something like Stop Asian Hate and progressivism, and we need to care about climate change, all this other stuff. How that happens in the truther community is anytime you talk about so-called race relations and racism, the system of racism, white supremacy, the savior avatar in the truther community, the way they deal with it is to distract and deflect with focusing your attention on subjects like mud floods, like Tartaria, like even flat earth. Like, oh, stop talking about race. This happened all the time when I first started talking about this information. When I was talking about the system of mind control itself. Why are you talking about racism with groups of people who are talking about flat earth? You're divisive. It's like, okay. Same thing's happening here. Why are you talking about racism when you could be talking about mud floods in Tartaria? Mind control. That's why. Because mind control is at the heart of all this hiding of information about mud floods in Tartaria, hiding of information about the non-heliocentric universe, hiding of the information of the core, the essence of why racism is such a thing, hiding of that information. It's for mind control. All of these fit in. They are subcategories to the major category that is mind control. So when you bring a subcategory, when you bring a little subcategory to deflect and dismiss from another subcategory, you're really exposing yourself. And like I've said in previous videos, more than 9 times out of 10, these individuals who are bringing up this mud flood, flat earth, Tartaria shit, when you're talking about the core issues, the very nature, the science and the psychology behind the system of racism and white supremacy, when you're talking about this in a small group or a big group, these motherfuckers are not going to come into your little group and say shit about that mud flood Tartaria shit. They're not going to say that. They're not going to walk into a real live room of people, of 350 fucking people talking about the infrastructure of the system of racism and white supremacy, going off on the years of mind control dealing with that. You think these people are going to walk into there and raise their hand and say, excuse me, sir, well, why aren't you talking about mud floods in Tartaria? Get the fuck out of here with that shit. But online, on YouTube, what are they going to do? They get on their little keyboard, type away on the keyboard about, mud floods in Tartaria and flat earth. Like I said, it's not to dismiss. For people who know, who've seen my information on my channel, I've done videos on mud floods and Tartaria. You can look at it if you want. hundreds of videos on flat Earth or the non-heliocentric universe. That's not the point. The point is these projectors, these deflectors, these dismissers of information are as big of a threat, if not a bigger threat, than the very system itself, because they're a more complex version of controlling the narrative, controlling the dialogue, and inhibiting people from deeply going into the issues that are existing in real time right now. When you're pinning one subcategory up against another subcategory, you are more dangerous than any good. Deal with the system of mind control, or just own the fact that you're just an entertainer. You have no interest in actual change. So, for people who find themselves in these conversations with these people, or in real life or in person, from experience, my advice would be to not even engage with these individuals. It's not worth it. As much as you would like to, I've seen it for years now. It is not worth it to engage with these people. They are only interested in defending their own versions of how they see things. The main thing is that they're defending of that is at the expense of the information and the perspectives that you are bringing. And like I said, that is more dangerous than any good. They are not on your team. Like I said, the individuals who are so-called progressive and saviors within the system of taking. They are givers in a society, giving to protect the system of taking. That's what it is. The people who are giving to defend the system of taking are the most dangerous, are the biggest threat to any kind of forward progress out there, both individually and beyond.